Michael Murphy is a motivational speaker, a paralyzed athlete, and a writer. His journey began in April 2007 when he fell off a roof in college, shattered his spine, and was paralyzed. At that time, he was 21 years old. Before this interview, when I asked Michael if there was a time in his life when he felt hopeless or helpless, his answer shocked me, and it is going to shock you as well. Michael's story and encouragement that you will get today is exactly what we need to hear.
Have you ever felt like giving up, quitting, throwing in the towel? Welcome to Never Ever Give Up Hope featuring Carol Graham. She's an author, health coach, and motivational speaker. Backed into a corner multiple times in her life, Carol shares with you stories on how she overcame some of the toughest obstacles a person can go through in life, but refused to give up hope. Rather than admit defeat, an opportunity was presented, and it involves each and every one of you. Carol will feature spectacular guests who will share their messages of hope, encouragement, and their inspiration to prove why life's adversities only make you stronger. And now, welcoming the host of the show, here's Carol Graham.
When I asked Michael to be on Never Ever Give Up Hope, I asked him if there was a time in his life when he felt hopeless or helpless. And this is his answer. Well, nothing major comes to mind. I've always felt that I've had help in bad situations as well as hope. Now, this comment comes from a man whose story is going to, I'm not sure how many of you might relate to it, but you certainly will be inspired by it. You will be encouraged by it. You will be lifted up by it. And you do not want to miss any part of Michael's story. So to begin, Michael, let's start from the beginning. Tell us your backstory, your childhood, whatever you would like to share.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on, Carol. I really appreciate it. So I grew up a pretty normal kid in Northern Virginia. I come from a loving, warm family of really competitive athletes. My brother and sister played sports in college, and I have a lot of really competitive people in my family. And I grew up playing all the sports, the little leagues, the baseball, the football, the basketball, and I sort of shined on the athletic field, not so much in the classroom. We may have had some sit downs with some headmasters of in eighth grade, wondering maybe you shouldn't go on to our high school because it's a little too tough for you. But I showed them. But I eventually made it through high school. I went to a school called the Potomac School in McLean, Virginia, and during that time, I happened to excel playing football and baseball, enough so where I decided to be a pitcher and a fullback in college at Randolph-Macon College in Ashland, Virginia, just north of Richmond. And it was there that I sort of came out of my shell academically and athletically. Like I said, I never really shined as a scholar until I took some history classes and really took some stuff that I became passionate about, some military history classes. During that time, I played 1 year of baseball for the Yellow Jackets and 2 years of football until I decided to retire. I wanted to focus on just being a college kid and joining my fraternity. I remember when I was in fifth grade, I went down to my dad's 50th fraternity reunion and just seeing that camaraderie, the brotherhood, and what that did after all those years, it really had an impact on me. And that brotherhood actually plays a role later down the road after I have my accident. So it's relevant to mention. So in the spring of 2007, I'm a junior. I'm a 21-year-old junior, and I had just retired. I'd hung up the cleats, hung up the glove, to focus on history. One Saturday night, and it was actually that day. I also played a lot of golf growing up. I played a lot with my brother and my dad. And that afternoon, I went out with a bunch of my buddies, a bunch of my fraternity friends. And if anybody listening knows golf and they're a fan of golf, they play golf, you know that breaking 90 and shooting in the 80s, that's a really significant accomplishment that a lot of golfers remember. And on April 21st, I broke 90 for the very first time. And I was ecstatic. I couldn't wait to call my dad and tell him. And so I was excited. All my friends were excited because it was a Saturday. There was an 80s party that night. We all had our outfits. And the plan was to go out and enjoy the evening. And one buddy of mine, he said, late, it's nice. Later on, let's meet down at my house and we'll go hang out up on the roof and just sort of finish the night there. So we're going through the night, and Sigma Alpha Epsilon is having a big rager, so to speak. And I'm 21 years old at the time, so I am of age, and things get a little hazy, as a lot of college happens with a lot of college kids. Eventually, I find myself down campus with my buddy Nick Jones. And we're backing his truck up to the back of his sort of one-story house with the pitched roof. And on the side, they're hugging one side, there's a chimney. And we climb up there, no big deal. And I'm not entirely sober, to be perfectly honest. And
we assumed that.
Right, exactly. I'll just put it mildly. And I don't remember a lot of the specific events leading up to it, but what I do remember is losing my balance. I remember bricks of the chimney, the very top of it, breaking free in my hand.
Oh my!
And then for the next 1 to 2 seconds, it's black as I free fall. And as I say in my book, gravity introduced me to the earth and my spine exploded. The next thing I know, I am laying flat on my back. I'm looking up at just a tapestry of beautiful stars in the sky. And I'm struggling to breathe. I don't feel any pain, but I notice that there's figures hovering around me and silhouettes. I can't see any faces, but I can hear words. My friends saying, "Michael, hold on, just lay down, stay there, stay still, don't move, don't move." And I hear the paramedics are on the way. And one of those voices, the first one I recognize, is my buddy Nick Jones, who was one of my best friends in college and still one of my best friends to this day. They say that the paramedics are on their way. And what happens next, a lot of people, they don't really believe me. And I say it's the moment where I knew what happened to me. And I distinctly remember trying to sit up and move my legs, and nothing happened. It just absolutely felt like they were encased in a block of cement. And when that happened, I remember laying my head back down, just sort of resigned to my fate, because I knew that I was instantly paralyzed. The reason I knew that is because I am the second spinal cord injury in my family.
Oh, really?
I am, yeah. I've only ever known my Aunt Paige, my mom's youngest sister, as a quadriplegic who used a big power wheelchair. Who, when I was young, I loved to run up and press the little horn on her hand controls and ride around on the back with her. But she was in a car accident when I was just a baby. Sadly, she recently passed due to some complications. But we had an amazing relationship, and so because I was aware of paralysis and spinal cord injury, when that happened, I knew, and I just laid there. And the next thing I know, there's paramedics around me, and they are strapping me in. They're putting the neck brace on. They are rolling me to the side. They're putting the backboard underneath me and lifting me up and putting me onto the gurney. And I remember getting into the back of the ambulance with all the bright lights and all the noise and all the commotion, and they're asking for my number. And then it hits me that they want to call my parents.
Oh, okay.
And just that sinking feeling of knowing that my parents were going to get probably one of the worst phone calls a parent never wants to get, besides the ultimate one, And they got that phone call at 2:36 in the morning, and I still feel terrible to this day that they got that. But what happened to me has been one of the most fortunate misfortunes in my life, and what came next was a long road to recovery, and that starting with the ICU, and then we can get into what happens after that here in a minute. But that was the end of my old life and the beginning of my new life, where I was a 21-year-old kid. I was a two-sport athlete, recently retired. I had just discovered an absolute love for history and writing and reading and academics. And because of that love of history and military history, I was also planning on a year out after I graduate, going into the Marine Corps to go to officer candidate school, to become an officer, and to do my part for my country and to serve. We just don't know what's going to happen in our life at any moment. We just don't know. We don't know when we're going to be plucked up from our old life and spit out into a brand new one, where you have to learn everything over. You have to learn how to sit up, how to get dressed, how to put your clothes on, how to take care of yourself, how to go to the bathroom, how to transfer in and out of your wheelchair, in and out of your car, into a shower, onto a toilet. Everything starts over when you have a spinal cord injury and your spine is severed. In my case, or for a lot of people out there, it might be an incomplete injury versus my complete injury. But my life completely changed on April 22nd, 2007. And like I said, it's been the most fortunate misfortune I ever could have asked for. It's given me strength that I never could have imagined I could find within myself. It's afforded me opportunities and new goals that wouldn't be possible if I didn't fall off that roof. Not to mention, I probably never would have met my wife, and I wouldn't have the child that I have now, my little 2-year-old man, Dylan. And I can get into that in a little bit, but we just don't know when we're going to get that phone call or the news or the diagnosis, or when that trauma or that life crisis is going to hit us. And I've been fortunate for 21 years leading up to my accident, I now look back at that as almost like a boot camp, preparing me to live the life that I'm living now as a paraplegic. When I was a freshman in high school, I broke my femur in a football game, and I started high school in a wheelchair with a big leg brace on. I had a lot of moments in sports that taught me about being competitive and persevering and not giving up and pushing forward. More so, I think I might have learned those lessons on the academic side, where it didn't come quite as easily to me as the sports did. But the people around me, the parents, the friends, the coaches, the teachers, everything I experienced barely getting into high school and then making it through and finding a love of school and all of that stuff, I believe prepared me. And one of those is, I remember when I was young and I was cleaning out the garage with my dad, and we happened to buy a house that was already ADA accessible because we bought it from a lady who had MS. So the house that I always grew up in had an elevator. It had a ramp out the back, and it had a two-sided ramp in our garage. And one day when we were cleaning the garage, my dad told me to get way under the part of the ramp where no one goes and no one sees. And I sort of objected. I was like, Dad, why do we need to clean all the way under there? No one's going to see it. And he says, because when you work, you don't half-ass it.
Right.
When you're doing a job and you're working, you put everything into it. And that stuck with me. What my college football coach told me about the only two things that we can control in life is our attitude and our effort. That has stuck with me. And all of those things have come together at the time as a 21-year-old young kid in the prime of his youth, where he literally had to start back over from square one. And that's what I did. I had to start back over from square one. But the person I was leading up to that, a happy kid, outgoing kid, loved to work hard, loved to be competitive and be the best. All of that really came together when I needed it most, when it came to starting my rehab after being in the ICU and having surgery and getting the rods and screws in my back and getting the back brace that I had to wear for 3 months while in the hospital. And so I see the first 21 years of my life as a boot camp almost that prepared me for the way I'm living now. And I'm still sort of I'm still fighting day to day, and there's still struggles. Later on, I'll sort of tell you about my second spinal cord injury that I recently had. But it's just another reminder that even when we've gone through something, and you know this as well as anybody, and all of the guests that you have on, Carol, that just because you have one crisis or trauma or tragedy doesn't mean you're immune for another one to come. And I think we all have to remember that. We all have to be prepared. We all have to be prepared to face that when it comes. And I've learned so much in this life as a paraplegic, and I feel like it's part of my purpose to just pass along some of the words of wisdom that I've learned, and just some of the tricks of the trade about what it means to be resilient and what it means to move past our plot twists in life, and especially finding hope in what a lot of people may think is a hopeless situation when it's really not. And that's why I'm so fortunate that you're having me on today, is just to share some of the messages that have helped me, just so I can pay it forward to help somebody else. Because when it comes to spinal cord injuries in the United States, there's 18,000 new cases a year. And it's weird to think that right now there's people walking around who have not had their spinal cord injury yet this year, but they will, because the statistics say that that will happen. And I hope when that happens, my book, my words, my actions can maybe give them a little bit of a roadmap of how to move forward positively.
We could very easily sign off right now, because you you have touched everything that I would want to ask you, in that the dilemma, the guilt, the fear, the trauma, everything that you went through, an attitude, how to maintain a positive attitude no matter what happens. And even so much as what you shared about be prepared. Be prepared. I think this is one of the messages that's coming across really clear. Be prepared, attitude-wise in particular, for something that may be inevitable in your life. Would you not agree with that?
I agree 110%.
And so this is the bottom line message, is in respect to everything that we just discussed, is what kept you focused? What did you hang on to? Because you had those moments like we just mentioned. There is no question, no doubt. And you are still battling in certain areas of your life, and probably always will, as many of us do. But what kept you focused in particular?
There was a number of things that kept me focused. And I'm thinking back right now to the time when I was in the ICU down at the hospital in Richmond, Virginia. And when I started my inpatient rehab, I was there for a month. There was a lot of things that kept me positive. And I'm not saying that I didn't have moments here and there of darkness, of tough times, especially when I was alone. But I was so fortunate to be surrounded by so much love and support that it almost made it tough at times to get down on myself. I was in the hospital 20 minutes down I-95 from where I went to school, and an hour and a half down 95 from where I grew up. So there was a constant influx of friends from school, family friends from home, and all over the area coming to visit me, as well as getting unbelievable message on Facebook and cards from people. And just the show of support that I had around me was incredible. And another big thing that kept me focused were my goals. And I think that's
right.
When we get down and we fall into that hole, how do we get back up to the top? We climb the rungs of the ladder to get back up there. And those rungs are made up of little victories, small goals that lead to the bigger goal. One of my first goals was just to make it to Randolph-Macon's graduation in a month's time, to see the seniors above me graduate. That was one thing that kept me motivated. Another thing was was my faith. And I've heard some stories from some of your past guests about certain Bible verses that come into their life at just the right time when they're supposed to happen. And for me, one of those was Isaiah 40:31, which is now tattooed down my left tricep, across from another verse that another phrase that I'll get to in just a minute. And it's, those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings of eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not grow faint. I might have mixed that up. You get the gist of it. And it showed up in get well cards. It showed up on a Sunday service show I was watching on TV. My mom found it at the front of a specific Bible that she had, because the creator thought that this was just the one verse you have to remember. And it just kept popping up and popping up. And I'd grown up in a religious family, not super, super religious, but this was kind of what really awakened me.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this growing faith helping me. I had a goal of not only getting to graduation and getting out of rehab in X amount of time, despite a lot of the staff and nurses warning my parents that he might need to dial it back some, and that his attitude right now that is so positive, it's not going to last. They warned my parents of this, and they said, well, you don't know our son. And they didn't know. They didn't know. And another bigger goal was just to recover, to regain my strength, but also to regain my independence, because my accident happened.
Right.
My accident happened 5 weeks out from the end of the school year. So I missed 5 weeks of school, but I wanted to be able to come back in the fall for my senior year and to be able to graduate on time. So that's kind of the big picture goal that I'm working on each day. But then there was another thing. One day my mom was down so when any of our family members are in the hospital, nobody is there alone at any point. So essentially what my parents did, they rented a condo across the street, and they essentially moved down to Richmond and were there constantly. And one day my mom was in a salon, and for some reason, she opened up to this lady, this stranger sitting next to her. In any other circumstances, she wouldn't have opened up the way that she did. And my mom actually doesn't remember this, because me being in the hospital is such a black spot to her. And she starts telling this woman about me, what happened. I'm in the hospital. And she says that her husband is a former retired Navy SEAL, and they live in the area. Well, wouldn't you know that the next day I get a knock on my door, and I get a visit. Well, I just finished up a day of rehab, and I get a visit from a real retired Navy SEAL. And this sort of, it just hits me right to the core, as somebody who in that moment was struggling with the fact that I will never be able to live out my goal and my dream of becoming a soldier, becoming an officer in the Marine Corps. And this man sits down, and we start to talk. We get to talking. We talk for a while, and I tell him about what's going on and how I'm doing physically, but also mentally. And he tells me stories about his experiences in BUDS and how we didn't go day to day or week to week. We went meal to meal. We went one evolution at a time. We didn't worry about what came next. But then he gave me a gift. When he walked in, I had noticed he was carrying this, it looked like a picture frame, but it was made out of stone. And in it, when he handed it to me, I looked at it, and in that stone was carved the phrase that has since gone down in history. It said, never, never, never give up. And that has sat next to my every bedside wherever I've lived, from Northern Virginia to Denver, Colorado, and it's been by my bedside ever since. And I know now in 2022 that the phrase never give up, to some people, it's been overused. It might not have the same pack the same punch. It might sound cliche, but back in 2007, the internet and social media wasn't what it was, and it really hadn't taken hold as much. And so I bought into what that Navy SEAL told me. I proceeded to attack my adversity and to attack rehab as if somebody had just lit a fire under my you-know-what, and I was just flying on all cylinders with the goal, the competitive goal of being the best at recovery, to be the best in rehab, to learn this, learn that, and to make it to graduation and to get out of the hospital and to recover faster than anyone. And so all of those things combined with my family and friends and the messages and the faith and just the words of encouragement, all of that really kept me focused on my goals, even in times of just not so much depression, but just maybe anger, frustration, woe is me because my back hurt, or I had an accident and I was wearing diapers because, like I said, when you're a spinal cord injury, you start back at square one because you no longer have control of any of your bodily functions. And everything is chaotic and haywire, but I always return to a lot of that faith and that picture frame of the never give up. And that's helped me ever since. And on the other arm, I have never give up in Greek, which is sort of a nod to my love for ancient history. And when I took a Greek language when I was studying in college, when I was studying some ancient history, and so I have a permanent reminder, literally on one arm, to never give up, and then on the other arm to have hope in the Lord, that He will renew my strength. And He absolutely did. And so that's just kind of one message I want to get across. And I know at times telling people, oh, just never give up, it can sound cliche and overused, and we hear it a ton, and it's just noise to some people. But if you really buy into it, it's amazing what you can do when you do that, and you have the right attitude and effort, and you make a conscious decision to rise up and reroute the course that you're on. And that reminds me of what it means to be resilient to me. And I think resiliency is the ability to rise up and make a decision to reroute your course, so combined with our own past experiences to get back to life, to get back to doing what we want to do, to be happy, despite whatever crisis or traumas we've been dealt.
I agree with you that the quote, never ever or never give up, can be cliche, but when you need it, it's a positive message that you will have in your psyche. And this is, I know, what your message has been. And I don't think we can ever say it enough, because we live in such a negative world, and more so in the last couple of years than ever. And when we have those moments, and we may have a bad moment and we can remember so-and-so said, Michael Murphy did it, and this one did it, and that one did it. And he also said how much my attitude affects my future. But essentially, it's keeping that positive message in front of us is what is going to get us through, just as it did you. And even putting it on your arms. I'm assuming your tattoos are on your arms.
Yes.
It's constantly in your vision, in your focus. And so I really thank you for that. I'm very touched as you're speaking, and I know the audience is as well. There are a few more things, of course, that we need to talk about today. And we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back. We're going to talk about Christopher Reeve Foundation and what you have accomplished for them. Also, definitely, we're going to be talking about your book. So we'll be right back in just a moment.
Carol Graham would like to show you the path from misery to miraculous triumph in her fast-paced memoir, Battered Hope. She relates her determination to succeed as someone who experienced one horrendous nightmare after another. Gang raped and left for dead, loss of a child, husband falsely imprisoned, and cancer. Nothing could break her tenacity or faith. No matter what you face, heartache, loss, suffering, or injustice, Carol will illustrate how she became a victor the same way you can. The secret is to never, ever give up hope. Order your copy at Amazon or batteredhope.blogspot.com.
I don't know about anyone else, but I don't have a word for it. I literally don't have a word for it. Inspired is an overused word. Even encouragement is an overused word. But I think you have touched on something that this audience really needs to hear, especially in today's world. And having an attitude, having the foresight, that you have and that you are giving to others, we need more of it. And I really appreciate you being on today, Michael, and sharing that. So before we go too much further into your story, there are a couple more things that I want to ask you. In 2008, you found a new passion. Now, this is just shortly after your accident. And you were introduced to hand cycling and adaptive sports. Your first race was with the Marine Corps Marathon after you teamed up with the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation to raise money for spinal cord research, and you raised $50,000. So touch on that just a little bit and share that with us, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Adaptive sports sort of came into my life abruptly one day when I came home and my mom asked, would you like to raise money for spinal cord injury research and get in really good shape at the same time? And before she was finished, I said yes, and I had no idea what she was talking about. Come to find out that she had some connections with the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, and they had offered to give me a spot in the 2008 Marine Corps Marathon in Washington, D.C. in exchange for being on their Team Reeve. And all I had to do was raise a minimum of $1,500 towards their research. So I linked up with an organization called Achilles Freedom Team, and where they loaned me a hand cycle that I trained on for the next couple months. And during that time, I spread the word about what I was doing. And before I knew it, my fundraising totals were over $20,000. The day came, I raced in my first marathon. Just a little bit over 2 hours, but I was having so much fun. I had a huge group of friends there and family. And it really ignited a new passion that was missing ever since I retired from sports and then had my accident, which is just that competitive side, is that the fact that I was quote unquote training for something and I had something to work for. And that was really the beginning of just my entry into the world of adaptive sports and trying all of them as quickly as I could. Everything from wheelchair rugby to skiing to hand cycling to sled hockey. But I really took to hand cycling, and the following year I teamed up with the Team Reeve again, and I raised another almost $20,000. And I did another Marine Corps marathon, and then I decided I want to do more of this. And I got into more and more races, doing time trials and road races and going to national championships and meeting a whole new group of people I never would have befriended if it wasn't for my accident and adaptive sports. And at this time, I was also in grad school at George Mason University, working towards my master's in American military history. Adaptive sports and joining up with the Christopher Reeve Foundation was also actually one of the things that led me towards meeting my wife, and also Tough Mudder competitions. Which, if you're not familiar with a Tough Mudder competition, it's 12 miles in the mud, and there's a dozen or so obstacles that you go through, over walls, underwater, through big ice buckets, through army crawling underneath barbed wire, and I represented Team Reeve again when I did this in 2012, and it was at this event. I did the event on a Saturday in September in 2012. The week before, I'd been asked by a former physical therapist of mine, hey, can you come in and just be a guinea pig for my group of physical therapists as they enter Spinal Cord Injury Week? And I said, sure, why not? So I came in, and and I had these big wounds on my knees from army crawling in the mud. And I gave a disclaimer to this class of kids all about my age. You're probably noticing these big wounds on my knees. I was crawling through mud at this Tough Mudder event. And afterwards, this one girl in the class with big blue eyes and long curly brown hair, and she's beautiful. And she said, I was at that same Tough Mudder. My sister-in-law saw you. Come to find out, they told Casey about this guy that they saw who was using an off-road hand cycle, and his friends were picking him up and putting him on the ground and putting him back in the bike, and they were lifting him over walls and helping him through mudslides. And turns out that was me. And a couple days later, I'm in front of her in this class, and we start to talking. That became my future wife and the mother of my son. And so, like I said, without adaptive sports, without my accident, I never would have met my wife. And I wouldn't have the cute little terrorizing 2-year-old toddler that we have now, who you love, but it makes you pull your hair out at times. Just learning how to be a parent, especially a parent in a wheelchair, that can be a little difficult at times. But the world of adaptive sports really gave me just some amazing things in my life that were missing, and that brought me back to being the athlete that I once was when I thought that those opportunities were over. And back in 2007, hand cycling was becoming more and more popular, because it's easy for a lot of the wounded veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan to hop on a bike and just go. And I became friends with a lot of those people. I joined up with the Paralyzed Veterans of America, the PVA racing team, and they let me race with them. And they joked with me, calling me the wannabe, because I was supposed to be a veteran, but I wasn't able to. But they let me race with them anyway. And over the next 2, 3, 4 years, I traveled all up and down the East Coast, doing the New York Marathon, Boston Marathon, national championships down in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and outside Atlanta, Georgia, and races in Greenville, South Carolina, to Florida, and becoming friends with just some amazing people, guys who are double amputees from IEDs in Iraq, and former Navy SEALs who were injured in an ambush in Panama. And it really introduced me to a world of people I never would have met before. And it helped remind me that when you're going through a trauma or a struggle, that to seek out people in a similar situation, because some of the healing that I got and the best times that I had and the most therapeutic times were after a training day. We're hanging out with our trunks open in the parking lot, breaking down our gear, and we're making fun of each other for this thing that they do as a paraplegic, or the fact that this one guy might have arm rest still on his chair, or anti-tippers, or he still uses a seatbelt. And we could just joke and mess around with each other in a way that you can't with somebody who's not in the same situation. And it was amazing how healing that was, combined with just being a teammate with those guys, and the time that I spent racing with PVA and setting the lofty goal of being a Paralympian as early as 2008 after my first marathon, and then watching reruns of the 2008 Beijing Paralympics, and seeing guys on the podium, men and women on the podium. And I recognized that their determination, their tenacity, their relentlessness and resiliency, and their ability to push themselves and not quit. I recognized some of those traits of Olympic gold medalists in myself. And
yes, definitely.
So that's something that I have been chasing for a long, long time. Up until recently, I've had to make some life changes, but I'm still not 100% done with this goal of mine. But it also led me to switch sports in 2015 and to get into monoskiing as a ski racer. Um,
Really?
yeah, yep. I quickly, so in 2009, I think I got on a monoski for the first time, but for the next like 4 or 5 years, the skiing in Virginia, it's short. I never really grew up skiing because I never wanted to jeopardize the spring baseball season. And so it was kind of just a recreational thing I did here and there. But as I got more into the racing as a hand cyclist, I realized I do not have the physical body of a cyclist. I am not long and lean and thin. I'm more of a linebacker fullback type of build, if you can picture that. And I I saw the writing on the wall in terms of my goal as an international athlete for Team USA as a hand cyclist. I saw that I could only get so far. And so I made the switch in 2015 to pursue a sport where my weight and size and strength could help me go faster with gravity down a mountain, sitting on a single ski in a bucket on a motorcycle shock with outriggers in my arms. And and I and it was around that time in 2015 that my wife and I, we moved from Northern Virginia out to here in Denver, Colorado, and I linked up with the National Sports Center for the Disabled, acronym NSCD, and they have a competition team where some of the best athletes from around the world go there to train. And from 2016 over the next 4 years, I trained with Paralympians from New Zealand to Chile to Great Britain,
Oh my goodness.
Japan,
Wow.
and I mean, it was amazing, and it was just another group of people that I could become teammates with and gain camaraderie from, and it was just so funny. At lunch every single day, in between training sessions, just the accents and the languages just shooting across the table. It was just amazing just to become friends with people who, as of a couple months ago, who have gotten more gold medals in Beijing, and I watched them, and I got to cheer them on. I'll shout out my friend Corey Peters. He won gold medal for New Zealand in the
Wow.
downhill monoskiing, which you have to have a little bit of a screw loose to want to go 70 to 80 miles an hour when you already have a major injury to you. My time out here in Denver and just trying more sports and ski racing has just been unbelievable.
And here I sit again, dumbfounded. It's never ending with you. Oh my word, your goals, your aspirations, your accomplishments. This is just so inspiring. Again, for a loss of a better word, I thank you. I thank you for that. Now, before we end this, which I wish we didn't have to, but we are getting close here,
Right.
tell us about your book. Who should buy it? Is it your story? Do you have a lot of these positive messages in it, etc.? Share that with us.
So when I fell, how I rerouted my life and found strength in a severed spine came out almost a year ago, coming up in a couple of days, through Morgan James Publishing. And this is actually part one of a 3-part series I'm working on to share my story. And what it does, it covers a lot of my life growing up, coming up in elementary school, high school, into college, and the family I grew up in, the outdoorsy person I was growing up part-time on a rural farm on the weekends in Virginia. And it talks about my academic struggles. So I know a lot of, especially teenagers, I know that they'll be able to relate to a lot of
Oh,
the stories
great.
that I tell. And I talk about transitioning into college and playing sports and fraternity stuff. All the while, I have a thread in there that talks about my time in the hospital. So I kind of go back and forth
Okay.
between these two timelines. And I think, and again, this is just part one, and it goes into my accident, what happened in the immediacy after that when I was in the ICU, and especially some of the tough nights that I had that have really set the stage for who I am in terms of the inner strength that I found. And so again, this is just part one. And I think anybody, especially new paraplegics, new spinal cord injuries, I think that is really the number one audience for this book, because there needs to be more books out there like this.
Of course.
A book called GIMP by Mark Zupan, who is in the documentary Murder Ball, which was nominated for an Academy Award, I think in 2005 or something. But his book inspired me when I had tough times after my accident.
Good
and
point.
I hope this book does the same. And I just think we need more people to tell their stories, specifically people in wheelchairs and spinal cord injuries. But I think one of the most important messages in this book is what I learned about something called post-traumatic growth. And it's something that I didn't know about up until a buddy of mine read an early version of my manuscript, who is an author in his own right and a contributor on MSNBC. And I've known him all my life since elementary school. And he came back and he said, look up something called post-traumatic growth, PTG, and see if you can weave this into your book. I started researching it and I was dumbfounded, because everything they were talking about, post-traumatic growth, which was a phrase coined by psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun in the 90s, and they defined it as positive change experienced as a result of the struggle with a major life crisis or traumatic event. And this is something that the scholarly research behind it has grown since this phrase was coined in the mid-90s. But the idea of strength through suffering has been around for thousands and thousands of years, of course. But they've coined it, and it's grown and grown and gotten more traction. And it's kind of pushing back against the stigma of PTSD, which is, everybody has heard of PTSD. I can almost assume.
Yeah.
But I feel like nobody has heard of post-traumatic growth. And what they found when they interviewed survivors of cancer, of earthquakes, tsunamis, people who have lost loved ones, who have just gone through some of the worst traumas in life, that they found there's 5 areas of improvement that they have discovered. And what I've done in my book is I've broken it down into an acronym called AWAKE. Because right now I feel like I'm living a life where I am fully awake. And those letters stand for awareness, warrior spirit, attachment, knowledge of self, and ecstasy. It's the idea of awareness. You're aware of new opportunities and doors in life that wouldn't have been possible without your trauma. For me, for instance, adaptive sports. Warrior spirit, you're stronger because of what you went through. Attachment, new relationships because of what you went through. For me, all my friends and teammates in adaptive sports. And the knowledge of self is another one that really hit me early on when I was smiling in the ICU because I realized I was alive. It's this appreciation. It's an appreciation for the life you're living and that you're still alive. And then ecstasy, it's a good word that fits the acronym, but it's anything in terms of spirituality, religious faith, and all of this stuff. I realized as I was doing this research that this is me. They're talking about me. I've experienced some sort of growth or benefit of these effects because of my accident. And some take longer to come to the surface than others, and people have different paths to getting to PTG. But I was just amazed that I was literally the person that they're talking about, and I had never heard of it. So that's kind of what I'm doing with my book. I'm not saying I'm a psychologist. I am not. But what I am in the purpose of this book and is to spread awareness of PTG and post-traumatic growth, and just to introduce it to people, because it can remind them that what you're going through, it might suck right now and it's tough and it hurts and it's hard and you think it's not going to get better, but there is hope, because statistics have proven that 75% of people will experience a major life trauma, and you have a 90% chance of experiencing some sort of one of those 5 aspects of post-traumatic growth. So you are statistically proven or guaranteed to find some sort of benefit, some sort of silver lining, some new strength from what you're going through. And I think that's just one of my favorite things in this book, besides just sharing my story and getting it out there. It's just sharing this message of that there's growth, and that what you're going through, you will get stronger because of it.
I sincerely thank you for that. And I think that the audience needs to listen to this interview a minimum of 2 times. Take notes, write them down. And also, I know that Michael is available if you want to ask him questions or contact him. All that contact information will be in the show notes. This is something that you would want to pass on to people who did not hear this broadcast as well. They need that inspiration. Again, that word that is so overly used, and yet we all need it. And also what you said about never, never, never giving up. It isn't just a cliche, it's a lifestyle. Yep. And this is your lifestyle. And you have been exactly that, an inspiration. And I thank you so much. Everything will be in your show notes, as well as how to contact you and also where to get your book, which is When I Fell, How I Rerouted My Life and Found Strength in a Severed Spine. Amazing title. In summary, any last words?
Just to remember that there's always hope in what you may think is a hopeless situation.
Perfect.
And that just to make the choice to rise up and reroute, and just focus on your attitude and your effort, and you'll be stronger.
Reroute, that's a perfect word. Thank you. And thank you so much, Michael, for being on Never, Ever Give Up Hope.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you for listening to Never, Ever Give Up Hope, featuring Carol Graham. Did you know that most people succeed because they are determined to? Quitting was never an option. Carol loves your comments and will respond to each one. So please subscribe and review this podcast. A rating of 5 stars would be outstanding and appreciated. Remember, if you are still here, there is always hope.